Welcome to the afternoon reading. We're going to get started. My name's Perrin Kerns, and I had the great pleasure of teaching a class all year, a group of 10 students. They were all such wonderful writers, and they work so hard. And I'm so happy you get to hear a little taste from each of them of what they produced this year. Give them a big hand. They worked really hard this year.
Hi, my name is Elena Deetz. I'm here from Eugene, Oregon. And just since I'm going first, I just want to acknowledge the tremendous amount of work that our instructor put in, and also just a wonderful group. I'm so grateful that I got to travel with these folks. So, okay. My story, my manuscript is called This Kind of Bird Flies Backwards. And if you recognize that reference, good for you, because it's an obscure one. It's book of poetry by Diane DePrima, who was one of the earlier Beat poets. And the subtitle of my book is The Future of Book Scouting in the Pacific Northwest. So it's about the people who make their living buying and selling used books in the Pacific Northwest. One of those people is my own stepdad. And so in the scene I read, he's training me to scout thrift stores for used books. By the time I was 10, Michael and I were recognized at all the finest thrift stores in Salem, Oregon. We were regulars at the Ark and the Humane Society thrift shop, where Michael had caught the scent for rare books. He would lead us into stores, his head and belly bobbing like two loose onions on a cocktail stick. I'd follow in his shadow, and then we'd flank the store. I looked nothing like Michael, but I mirrored his furtive movements. As Michael's apprentice, I was trained to spot value in the fiction section. The first lesson from my master was humbling. No fiction is valuable, which is why he left it to me. To scout the fiction stacks, you build and maintain a mental checklist of writers, ones people like, but whose books are scarce enough that they still have value. In the A section, you always look for Edward Abbey. A first edition of the Monkey Wrench Gang increases in value with each rising degree in the Earth's temperature. In the B shelves, you might find James Baldwin, whose novels were first published as pulp fiction because of the regrettable marketing mores of the mid-20th century. The genius of Giovanni's Room shines through. At C, you check for books by Raymond Carver, for overlooked inscriptions to old neighbors in towns around the Pacific Northwest. On to D, where there's value in Didion, especially if you can find the rare fiction from her early career. She was Henry James if he smoked exactly 5 cigarettes a day. Michael trained me to skip authors whose surnames began with E and F. You're not going to find a first edition of Fitzgerald in a thrift store. You can also move on quickly from G through I. Apologies to Ishiguro and his Remainders of the Day. J produces occasional finds, but K can be lucrative, and not because of Jack Kerouac, whose books are the first ones bought by badly trained scouts. In the Northwest, you're looking for William Kittredge, who, like Carver, was around enough to sign often, and whose spare elemental prose keeps readers devoted. The writer to look for in L is Ursula K. Le Guin. Her best books were published in smaller runs, and her ideas continue to resonate in a changing world. Be cautious in M. Thrift stores are lousy with Frank McCourt's depressing books about Ireland. Readers can tell the difference between misery and merit. Joyce Carol Oates is the name to look for in O, although she's written so many fine books that none of them are particularly valuable. You can pluck Michael Ondate's small press collections from the tessellation of Ralph Fiennes' face in the made-for-a-motion picture paperbacks of The English Patient. In P, there's a market for Pynchon among his neurotic readers, but the unwieldy novels are a pain in the ass to lug around. If you find an early edition of Ayn Rand in R, remember that eventually you'll have to sell it to the kind of person who likes her books. S is the exception, where it pays to scout the American canon. You can tell by lifting a Steinbeck whether it's book club, and if not, even a second or later printing is valuable. Then there's Wallace Stegner, somehow less known. He did his best writing later in his career, and you can still find first editions in thrift stores. Once you get to T, do not go gently to the counter with a book by Dylan Thomas. His appetite for life would shock our 21st century sensibilities, but endeared him to a devoted contemporaneous readership. He's just too common to be valuable. U and V are useless except for Vonnegut. W includes giants, Evelyn Waugh, Edith Wharton, Oscar Wilde. But you can skip right past them and go straight for David Foster Wallace, whose encyclopedic rants, though unreadable, are in fierce demand among the literati of Instagram and TikTok. While you're there, keep an eye out for Derek Walcott, the Caribbean poet and novelist whose reputation is burnished by the Hilton Hall's essays in the New Yorker. Zoom through the rest of the alphabet and you're done. You grow your own sense of value. You know what's rare. Maybe this is why Michael didn't mind being seen with mustard on his sleeves at thrift stores around the Mid-Valley. We were two rare editions, never before published, a book scout in his prime and the tow-headed apprentice who followed him everywhere. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name's Elena. I wrote a manuscript which is a collection of nature writing and personal essay told through the lens of a wreath maker from the Southwest. This piece is called Ready to Go Anywhere, and I dedicate it to my mom. Wreath making, can you hear me okay? Yeah. Wreath making is a way to pay homage to the beauty of plants in their skeletal winter forms. Not bright colors, not fleshy fullness, but the rattling, dry, woody structure left after reproduction is done and the weather turns cold. Bleached grasses and seed pods, these are my treasures. Their colors range from deep warm browns through all shades of tan into creams, grays, and off-whites. I'm a traditionalist. I love this subtle palette. I love it in the same way I love an old house with dark window casings, creamy walls, and white trim. It's so elegant and simple. At times, I let myself be swept away by these beauties and construct nest-like wreaths of only dried plants. The grasses are used after they have bloomed, their seeds have dropped, and only the chaff remains. I like the sound of their names. I want to be out in deep autumn, walking amongst them, finding them, gathering them to myself, and then weaving them around into a loose circle. The circle, the cycle, calling to me. Try it. Say their names. Indian ricegrass, Johnson, blue grama, rabbit's foot, mesa dropseed, featherfinger, tall oat. Call out to the seed pods. Showy goldeneye, yucca baccata, yucca elata, agave, poppy, wild cotton, echinacea, black-eyed Susan, milkweed. Plants have a stark beauty in their final form. I have found this with humans, too. Hair, skin, and muscle, shriveled or gone, their inner essence becomes more clear, more evident. In her last years, my mother had dementia. As her condition advanced, much to my great fortune, she became more content. She loved to watch the birds outside her window. She rambled through her memories as her body shrunk and weakened. She became quietly childlike. I would ask her about her thoughts, and she'd say, "I'm thinking about poems." I'd say, "Which poems?" She'd answer, "Any poem." She often mused, "I don't know why I'm still hanging around this place." She was completing the circle of her life wreath. As she was dying, her friends came and read to her. Right up to her end, there were beautiful words circling around her ears, her heart, her mind. Looking back, it was the fall of 1971. My mom had taken us kids to spend the full cycle of the year on an island which had been her family's summer vacation spot. She'd never been there in winter, and it had been calling to her. We migrated northeast, opposite the birds, and landed in a friend's summer house up on top of Dancing Hill. It was a place where the native inhabitants of the island had danced their ceremonies. My mom was a dancer, so this was fitting. I remember one autumn afternoon. We were out in the yard overlooking the ocean. We had Bob Dylan cranked up on the turntable, and we were doing just that, dancing around on the lawn. When Mr. Tambourine Man came on, my mother turned to me and said, "I want you to play this song at my funeral." I took this in stride. My mom did not filter her thoughts for me. However, as I gaze back on the scene, it seems a strange thing for a mother still in her prime to say to her 11-year-old daughter. The moment wedged itself in my memory. After my mother died, I went to a dear friend who's a beautiful singer. We went through the lyrics together, and there was my mom in her last years. So many of the lines describing the sensations and feelings she had struggled to describe for me. Quote, "My weariness amazes me, I'm branded on my feet. I have no one to meet. My senses have been stripped, my hands can't feel to grip. I'm ready to go anywhere, I'm ready for to fade into my own parade. Cast your dancing spell my way, I promise to go under it." There also was my mom's love of words. If you hear vague traces of skipping reels of rhyme to your tambourine in time. My mom, the poet, the dancer, letting words swirl and spin her. How could she have known so long ago that this song would describe her death journey with stunning accuracy? My friend agreed to sing Mr. Tambourine Man at my mom's memorial in Albuquerque. She traveled there from Flagstaff and sang it out. The 150 people gathered there sang the chorus with her, all of us together. I visualized my mother dancing out to the windy beach, far from the twisted reach of crazy sorrow. Yes, to dance beneath the diamond sky with one hand waving free, silhouetted by the sea. She would have loved it. My mom's body is now ashes. A few days before her memorial, her circle of women gathered for a private farewell ceremony. We shared her poems, we drummed and rattled, laughed and cried. In the end, we went out into my mom's beautiful tiny garden and threw handfuls of her ashes into the windy sky. Dry grasses and pods eventually break down, giving their carbon back to the earth. So too with us. It's the circle, the cycle of life on this twirling blue orb. We are stardust. We are carbon. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Melissa Bush. This year I wrote a memoir about my life as an expat living in 8 or so countries called To a Land Where Joy Shall Never End. During this process, I began to explore why I felt such a need to fly away. And what emerged were fragments I call my girl pieces, the different girls I used to be and still am. Here are 4 of them. Good little girl. She tells her mother in church that she has to go to the bathroom, and the mother gets up and goes with her. It is a nighttime service, and it is dark. The mother flicks the switch, and the room floods with light. The good little girl walks holding the mother's hand. She does not run. She wears shiny black patent leather shoes with white lace anklets, and of course, a dress. She feels the cool air of the underground place rise up between her legs. Her dress, like all of them, has a big bow in the back to tie her in place. Thirsty girl. She explodes out of the family Pontiac when they arrived at her great uncle and aunt's home. A long drive, and she craves water. The thirsty girl runs barefoot into a dark kitchen and grabs a jelly jar and pours down cold water from an old faucet. She drinks and drinks, tilting her head up toward the soot-stained ceiling and back down to the bare spots of the wooden floor where you can see down through to the basement. Fish girl. She and her brother Stevie caught the little bass real quick with a barbed hook of corn kernels, pulling the rod together until they brought it onto the gravel shore. They went right back to the house and back down to the basement to gut it. Fish Girl breathed with her mouth wide open and gripped the edges of the big white laundry sink with both hands, putting her head right even with her uncle's elbow, an eye to round eye with the fish that flopped slick and urgent in her uncle's right-hand grip. She could smell its muddy river self. Stevie hopped up and down. Let me see. Let me see. The uncle banged the fish heads 3 times against the white of the sink, and red blood misted the sides like the dirty fine spray of a wet sneeze. Fish Girl breathed in quick. She didn't know fish blood was red. "You're hurting it," Stevie cried. "You take this knife now, and you stick it straight up its butthole, see?" the uncle instructed. Fish Girl watched how the little knife, so sharp, slid in and up, and the little bass cleaved into left and right. "See," the uncle said, "spread the belly, pull the guts out till it's empty, and we're done." He then washed it clean, the hollowed-out now fish. Relieved that it was over, Fish Girl looked for her brother, but he had slipped away upstairs. Altar Girl. The choir director is crooning like Sinatra with his head down low and to the side, yanking the accordion neck of the microphone attached to the pulpit. He bears down for the final verse. Come home, ye who are weary, come home. Altar Girl decides. She steps into the aisle. She's like a gunslinger and takes a wide stance. God is at the other end. With his own gun cocked, he is going to kill the sinning right out of her, she guessed. Altar Girl lays her head on the hardwood altar, confessing all her meanness. She can feel the cold floor air floating up her thin dress. She repeats the words that the preacher tells her to say like a virgin's wedding vows. Jesus, forgive me, of my sins, I'm so sorry, amen, amen. And sure enough, this little dry scab on her heart gets picked off neat and clean, and she feels it float away off down to hell. And it feels so good that surely now she must be saved. Green Girl. I am that green girl lying in the April clover. I wear a green striped t-shirt, size 6X now, but a green check dress with a big bow in the back when I go to church. I like to chew on green fruit-striped gum that the zebra sells on TV. Yipes, stripes, he says. When I like someone, when I love someone, I think I see green light all around them. And secretly, I found I really like myself. I love myself, so I must be green. I also know that I'm green because I heard this lady in a restaurant tell my mother that my skin is such pretty olive color. So I know I am green like the salty, hard olives that's been there in the refrigerator since forever, floating in this cloudy juice. And sometimes when no one's in the kitchen, I'll slip my played outside dirty first 2 fingers into the slender jar and draw 1 or 2 of them out and pop them into my mouth. They don't taste bad, they don't taste good, but they taste green. Green is best when I'm lying eye level in the clover, pushing up green smell all around my head. The little green clover stems bend and twist loud inside my ears, and their little white heads are green lit up underneath and smell like green honey. I pinch them between my fingers with scissor snap precision and put them into my mouth, munching like a horse. The juice in them is bitter green, and I swallow it down like medicine because I want to be green inside too.
My name is David. I'll be reading a couple short pieces from the memoir I've written titled The Church of One Life: Family, Friends, Strangers, Travel, Tears, Trees, Racism, Sex, Faith, Death, Meteors, Absence, Presence, Slime Mold, and Other Hymns to Being. This is titled Central Oregon, February 26th, 1979. Sitting in my local coffee shop today, sipping my $4 Americano, my mind jumps back to 10-cent coffee in Willowdale 45 years ago. I can thank my brother, and I do, that I found myself that day waiting on a low sagebrush-covered hill just off Highway 97 near Shaniko, not knowing I'd see the end of the world. Jim was clear this was not a chance to miss. We'd gotten up at 2 a.m., driven across the mountains through snow on the pass to find clear skies. Please, oh please, let the mountains hold back the overcast. At Sisters, we turned north to get further into the zone of totality. I rode shotgun, checking the map, holding a pinhole up to the window into the morning light, watching the dark bite enter the sun's disk. How far to drive? How long to wait till we pull off? With a good piece of the sun already eaten in the pinhole image, at last we picked our spot, pulled off onto the shoulder, and climbed a little way up the hillside. I'd read up on the phenomena around a solar eclipse, but none of it prepared me. I was only eager to observe a celestial marvel as a thoroughly modern, rational man. I had no idea what it would touch. The sagebrush and bunchgrass growing shadowy dim, soon now. The still air swiftly growing colder, unexpected a wind out of the east, sudden horizon-wide bands of light and dark sweeping past, racing west toward the mountains and farther sea. The birds, moments before busy about their lives, now silent. The pinhole confirmed, total eclipse. I looked up at a sun not there. The ring of the corona proclaimed the absence. The dark impossibility called below and beyond science. No sun, no life, the end of the world. I felt it, just as surely as I knew in my head the sun would return, a real terror, a fact just as true as moon and sun's alignment. And then the light returned, the world restored. We saw on the map that Shaniko, a mostly ghost town, was just a bit east of us. The name drew us to it, so we drove over to look at the weathered, empty buildings. From there, we turned south down the switchback road to Antelope. In 1979, the most striking thing to us was the classic white-painted wooden church with its steeple-mounted bell and his and hers outhouses behind it. From Antelope, then, back to the highway and the Willowdale Cafe. Eggs and hash browns, conversations with the owner, cook, waitress, and patrons at the few other tables. And the coffee cost just 10 cents. It was terrible coffee, but still just 10 cents. That day will never come again. That world has ended. And still, the sun rose this morning. The birds sang, "Beyond reason, I am here." And back around the turn of the century, I was doing a fair amount of commuting back and forth from Portland to Enterprise. And so this is a poem that talks about that time. A welcome kindness. His 4-year-old was painting everyone's nails. How could he resist? So with 10 fingers tipped in 10 colors, he got in the car. 300 miles back to the job, and hours later, the usual stop for gas, just shy of Pendleton in the heart of Old West farm and ranch land. There at the truck stop, with his many-colored fingernails, a Joseph's coat in reverse, but no less a sign of father's love. There, with all the travelers and truckers around, he tucked his hands in his pockets, going in to pay, waiting in line, then no choice but to flash all those colors gaudier than the lottery scratchets under the glass. The cashier, an older woman, hardly glanced, just smiled, friendly. "So, how old is your daughter?"
Hello, my name is Donna. My manuscript is called The Jeweled Net, Reflections on Life, Love. All right, my name is Donna. My manuscript is called The Jeweled Net, Reflections on Life, Love, and Letting Go. This is a piece from the manuscript called Luminarias, and in case anybody doesn't know what a luminaria is, here's a little prop. The year I was 10 years old, Dad decided we would make luminarias on Christmas Eve. Luminarias are a tradition in New Mexico going back 300 years. These days, people often call them farolitos, which means little lanterns, since luminarias originally referred to small bonfires. But I always called them luminarias, and Dad made up his own word for them, sacaleros. Whatever you call them, thousands of little lanterns line the streets and walls and rooftops of Albuquerque on Christmas Eve to light the way for Mary and Joseph and the Christ child. This was not part of Dad's Presbyterian upbringing, but in 1968, he decided we would participate in the neighborhood display. A few days before Christmas Eve, we bought a box of special luminaria candles at the grocery store. In the cold afternoon sun, we folded down the tops of 25 plain brown lunch sacks to make a stiff 1-inch border. This helped hold the bag open while we dumped in a couple of cups of sand that Dad had dug out of the irrigation ditch bank behind the house. Then we twisted each stubby little votive candle down into a bag and positioned the luminarias along the driveway and sidewalk and front porch steps. He made sure all the seams were on the back side of the bags as they stood in place. I could hardly wait for the shadows to lengthen and the sky to turn the desert sunset shades of gold and apricot and coral. We buttoned up our coats and went outside with old leftover taper candles to use as lighters. Dad lit mine with a match, and I carefully bent over each little bag, lighting the candle with my flame and watching to see that it stayed lit before moving to the next bag. As the sky turned purple, then gray, then black, we stepped out into the street to see what we had created. The little bags glowed with warm golden light, flickering in the cold desert night. It seemed magical to me then, and it still does. On clear, calm nights, the candles will burn until daylight. They are symbols of hope, welcoming in weary strangers, warding off darkness. I've lit luminarias every Christmas Eve since then. When I moved to Washington State, the tradition became more of a challenge. That first year, I didn't know where to find sand. That was never a problem in New Mexico, so I used kitty litter. My dad laughed when I told him about it on the phone. Watch out that the neighborhood cats don't set their tails on fire. The next year, I found bags of sand at the home building supply store. I told the clerk I was buying it to make sandbags. It had been raining heavily and local rivers were flooding. It was a better explanation than, I need sand to put in brown lunch sacks with candles in them. Dad chuckled over that one too. The first year after I married Joe and became a stepmom, the kids were mystified at all the hullabaloo about lunch bags and dirt and candles. On the afternoon of Christmas Eve, Joe set the kids up near the trash can where we stored the sand and handed them plastic Scooby-Doo cups. They scooped just the right amount of sand into the bags while I opened each box of 36 candles. One candle went into each bag, and the Luminarias were put into the kids' wagons to be wheeled out and placed on the driveway, sidewalk, and front porch steps. I inspected the bag placement, and the kids eventually learned to make sure the seams faced the back. Then we waited for dusk. I showed the kids how to hold a Bic lighter at an angle so they wouldn't get burned as they lowered the flame down to the candle in the bag and waited to make sure the candle flame stayed lit. At this point in the ritual, the kids were done and wanted to get in out of the cold and drink hot chocolate and begged to open presents early. But later in the evening, after our traditional Christmas Eve dinner with the good china, I would slip out to watch the Luminarias flickering in the dark. Cars passing by on the road slowed down as the occupants marveled at the display. And I would stand under Orion's belt and the winter circle of stars and think of Dad. Throughout the night and just before dawn, I would get up and count the bags that were still lit. In 1968, we set out 25 sacaleros. Nowadays, I make over 100, and depending on the atmospheric conditions overnight, there may still be a dozen bravely glowing lanterns in the dawn light before they eventually sputter out. I take heart when many Luminarias remain lit. It's a good omen for the year ahead. And if the bags go dark, if the candles have been snuffed out before they were completely consumed, I feel an irrational trepidation and dread. The year after my sister Nancy died, I went home to Albuquerque for Christmas. On Christmas Eve, my parents and I drove to the cemetery where Nancy is buried and watched her husband and son light a dozen luminarias on her grave. The whole cemetery glowed with rectangles of golden flickering light as families gathered to decorate the graves and spend part of the holy night with their departed loved ones. Children skipped between the gravestones, filled with anticipation, just being children. It felt like the dead were with us, enjoying the perfume of piñon fires that filled the night air, with the luminarias lighting their way home. We drove away through neighborhoods decorated with Christmas lights and little glowing bags, and Dad and I lit our own sacaleros with his propane torch at home. It was the last time we did this together. I thought of him on Christmas Eve, the last one before he died, sleeping alone in his stark little room at the Alzheimer's facility, surrounded by strangers who had never heard him whistle or watch him point out the stars. Once he burned as brightly as 100 little candles in the darkness. Now his light was growing dim, only a few flames still flickering as the synapses struggled to fire. His dawn was drawing near. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Illyria. This is a piece from my book in progress, which centers on Douglas Island in Southeast Alaska, exploring history, family, nature, and the concept of home. I dedicate this to the original occupants of the island, the Tlingit people, the Taku Kwan and the Ak Kwan. An island goes to therapy, session transcript. Begin recording. 1, below the surface geology. So Douglas, let's mine what's going on here and recap where we left off last week. You spent a lot of the session talking about how people don't get you, especially deep down who you really are, how people only latch on to one aspect of your personality. Gold, it's always gold, you said. It's all image, you said. Easy facts to recite for tourists. World's largest gold mine, the ore crushing, the stamp mills going day and night, the cave-in that destroyed everything, all the wealth taken away. Then you said good riddance. It was too shiny anyhow. Shall we explore this? Clearly, you're not identifying yourself this way anymore. I hear you saying you're tired of the hard rock gold thing, the granite, the quartz. We both know there's more to you than that. 2, identifies as. We need to zero in on your malaise. You seem itchy in your skin. More than that, I'd say you've outgrown it. You're not who you were 10 years ago, 50 years ago, hell, 1,000. I know you've been there all along, but it seems you've been caught up in living out others' expectations of you. You've allowed yourself to conform, and as a result have fallen prey to a syndrome, well, a disease, one that's swept the globe. I had hoped you could have escaped it, but from our first session, I could see that wasn't the case. I have to imagine this is obvious to you too. Douglas, you're covered. You're infested, actually, with the names of dead white men, most of whom, it's safe to say, weren't from around here. Yeah, I figured you were aware. It's just you haven't brought it up, and it's a pretty serious case. They're all over you. It's affecting your sense of self. Let's review your baseline, and we can move forward from there. Well, your first name, to start with, named for John Douglas, Bishop of Salisbury in 1794 by another dead white European male, Captain George Vancouver. Fast forward 100 years, and more white men arrived to work the Treadwell gold mine, settling on your shores. There was a time in there for a course correction, but your condition got a foothold, and it spread wildly after that. There's Mount Troy, after a territorial governor of Alaska, Mount Ben Stewart, after an early Juneau mayor, Mount Bradley, towering over this town, such an iconic part of you. Named in 1939 for Frederick Bradley, president of this and that, banks and mines all over the West. He found his way right under your skin. I know, it's spread through most of your key features. How is this landing? Sobering, isn't it? It's so widespread. The condition might have been benign if it wasn't so prevalent. I'm going to give it to you straight. I'm afraid you may develop psychosis. You've got to be intentional about change. I'm going to prescribe something: diversity, inclusion of other names and voices. My advice is to start considering other pronouns for yourself. Experiment, see what it feels like. Try on a new wardrobe in every way you can think of. Ask yourself, who were the women of this place merging their lives with yours? Who were the non-gendered or multi-gendered people who lived and loved on your soil? Go back to the first people, the ones who came after the ice left, the ones who first gave you meaning. What's that? No, I don't see you needing meds. You and the people you keep company with, you can do this. 3, origin story. Okay, we're uncovering a lot in this session. Breathe. Remember how resilient you are. I'm serious. This is hard work. I'm proud of you. All right, let's take a deeper dive. I can see you're ready to go there. Let's go back in time, before all these Europeans all over your body. This may feel like past life regression. Stay grounded. I got you. And you've got you. Close your eyes. As we explore your true identity, I want you to really feel the sensations deep down in the core of you. Imagine your formation, ice weighing on you, the frozen grasp, the many centuries, then the retreat, ice rolling off you, swells of ridges and valleys. Perhaps you have feelings about this? Just take a moment. Now, the beginning of your true skin. The birds that come, the seeds, the green riot tangling up from your soil in muskegs and alpine meadows and shadowed forests, spruce, salmonberry, shooting star, hemlock and hellebore, deer cabbage filling valleys, in the streams, salmon wriggling, carrying the sea into you, and the people who come after the ice. See them. See them gathering nettle and blueberry, drying the salmon. Hear them. Hear how they speak to you. These people know you. They know all your identities, all your personalities, And island, you know them. You are all one. I am going to give you some names, your given names. If tears come, welcome them. These are ancient names, rising towards you once again. In these words, there is more than sound. There is language that holds the nature of light, the way water falls, the architecture of glaciers and gods. Island, your true identity is Anach Ya Andaganye, where the sun rays touch first. You are Deshu Ak, little lagoon at the end of the trail. Kalahin Aku, inside a person's mouth creek. Sayek, spirit helper. Try them on, island. I think it will feel like coming home. End recording.
So my name's Tammy, and I'm reading an excerpt from my memoir that's titled Unbridled, Writing Grief. It's about surviving loss, redefining myself, and eventually learning to thrive through my lifelong love of horses and horseback riding. Wave. A wave is a disturbance that travels through space, time, usually accompanied by the transfer of energy. Pueblo Bonito. It should have been me. I still think the words. More accurately, I live the words. At times I think it's a cop-out, but most times I think it's truthful. That's where it stays for now. It wasn't me. It was my husband. He took his last breath on a beach in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. My daughter Arison and I watched. The gray sand that cradled his motionless body was coarse, coarser than most sand. I remember because it stayed stuck to both our bodies all the way to the hospital. The minuscule particles of shells stayed embedded in my flesh until the shower water washed them down the drain the next day. I remember because my bare feet stepped on them piled up around the metal drain. I meticulously picked the tiny particles out of my heels before putting on my sandals. I remember the little things. Blue splotches on his wet skin. They had just pulled him from the salt water. The scene didn't add up. I screamed. My daughter Arison grabbed my arm and pulled me towards her. I remember her flesh feeling wet too. She had also just come from the ocean. After Doug was pulled from the ocean to the beach, a thick orange rope quickly surrounded him. They must keep it tucked away for easy access for just these emergencies to separate the spectators. But it separated me too. They wouldn't let me near. I stood on the other side of the thick orange rope with tourists in bathing suits and towels, and some were still even holding drinks. The only ones they allowed around his listless body were men dressed in white dress shirts that worked for the Pueblo Bonito resort where we had just arrived the day before. They had it wrong. Any second, Doug would get up, and his blue eyes would shift with a certain sheen, and his broad, mischievous grin would hint he had just pulled one off again. I'd grab his hand and give him a quick smile and laugh. It was ours, a connection. He loved to bend the rules. I let the rules bend me, but he didn't get up. There are no rules for this. Orange. I wasn't strong enough for the thick arms of the hotel workers that pushed me back when I tried to cross the rope. In desperation, I screamed for attention, something to set me apart from the spectators. I'm his wife, that's my husband of 27 years, but it didn't matter. They kept me away, as well as an emergency room doctor from the States that kept asking to help when he could see they didn't know how to use the defibrillator. I screamed at them to let the doctor help. An emergency room nurse who stood in the crowd shouted out directions when it was becoming increasingly obvious they weren't trained paramedics. It was frenzied chaos. They didn't speak English. My voice, I didn't recognize it. A scream doesn't describe how it sounded. It was low, yet loud, like a wild animal just separated from its herd. Orange. It's the universal color to signify danger. And now, when I see the plastic mesh versions draped across a construction scene on the side of the roads, I regress. Orange means caution. Maybe there's an exposed hole. Watch your step. Orange means there is something here that is not normal. Orange means you are separated from that something. Orange means death. I wanted my lips pressed to his forehead. I knew he was waiting for me. We were never alone from each other. I wanted to coax him back. We all needed him. Finally, an ambulance arrived 45 minutes later from a hospital just 5 minutes away. I heard spectators say they had a pulse, and then someone said his color blue was a bad sign. I heard the waves in the background. The sun on my back was hot, and I felt my daughter's body limp in my arms. Strangers tried to console us. A woman pushed a cell phone in my hand and told me not to leave his side. I instructed my daughter's friend to run to our hotel room to grab all of our passports. I don't know why that was so important, but it's all I could think of that made any sense. He quickly returned with our passports in a plastic Target bag. Someone pushed some flip-flops on my bare feet. They were blue, and my heels hung over the end. I remember the little things. While the ambulance workers started to load him on the gurney, I was talking to Doug on the other side of the orange rope. My voice became slow and steady. The voice didn't sound like mine. I remember hearing the words float out of my mouth and penetrate the moment, but it was in a tone I'd never heard myself use. I felt like an actor. This was a role I had an audition for. It wasn't me anymore. Strange, yet beautiful how our psyche protects us from the most horrific nightmares. The large crowd of tourists that formed started chanting. It sounded like a sporting event. In unison, they kept pleading, "Come on, Doug, stay with us. You can do this." I noticed at that moment a little boy off into the side, sitting in the sand with his back turned, crying. His mother turned and scooped him up in his arms, leaving his shovel stuck in the sand. They left as the little boy fought in his mother's arms, hoping she would stop so he could retrieve the red shovel. I don't remember, but later people told me they saw Doug open his eyes and gasp for air while he was lying on the sand. I wonder, did the mother ever take the little boy back to get his red shovel? A group of people cleared the concrete steps that led from the beach and onto the patio. They quickly pushed aside the glass tables with rainbow-colored umbrellas and white plastic chairs to make a wide aisle for the ambulance workers to carry Doug out on the gurney. I remember passing a woman sitting in a chair with her eyes closed, doing Hail Marys with a rosary held to her forehead. I grabbed the plastic bag with our passports and ran after the gurney to the ambulance. Erison ran beside me with her arm linked to mine. We swore not to leave each other's side. Doug and I both died on a beach in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nancy. I'm from Ashland, Oregon. I'm reading from my memoir, A Wilderness Within, 10 Essentials for Survival. This piece is called Dawn. On the north side of their Ashland cottage, a clutch of tall conifers, 5 incense cedar and 2 ponderosa pine, finger the sky and entwine their branching arms as they reach for the first light of dawn. 6 feet up the trunk of the tallest tree, the woman mounts a simple wooden bird box to the fissured bark, positions its round hole to face the morning sun. She waits and watches. In the chill days of early spring, a pair of house wrens, tiny brown birds with slender beaks and outsized melodic voices, claim the box and scrounge the ground beneath the tree for twigs and insects. The woman and the wrens eye each other with calm recognition and go about their separate projects, companionable and with purpose. The woman's heart lifts to see the wrens make a home here, to hear their voices clearly in the changing soundscape. Her heart lifts to make her own home here too, to embrace a new beginning. She has left the city with all its urgent busyness and moved to this quiet place, this new existence so close to animals and plants and the raw order of life. Like the first light of a day, she gives this fresh beginning her attention. She has plans for how to shape this place, an old farmstead in need of care. She thinks a patio planted with a surround of native shrubs and flowers to feed pollinators and birds would be just the thing, a project she set in motion before the wrens appeared. Now she frets as trucks drive close to the cottage, near the bird box to offload gravel. The workers chiff their metal shovels into the rocks and sling them with a clatter into wheelbarrows before hauling them away. The woman flutters about, feeling protective. The wrens continue to busy themselves with romance, trilling up and down the scale, sounding maniacally happy. They care less about the proximity of giant boots, swinging limbs, and the brash talk of humans than what they themselves are about, nesting. While workers build a patio, the wrens build a nest. Days begin to warm, eggs are laid and incubated under the downy belly of the female wren, who looks down her pointy beak at the woman from her porthole like some stern librarian. A few weeks on, hungry voices pitch high from inside the nest box. The male wren appears with offerings of food, a fan of moth wings showing from his beak, the shiny back of a beetle, the fat tube of a caterpillar. The woman feels like a doula, though all she did was mount the nest box with intention and open her heart to possibility. Mornings come earlier, night grows shy, leaving more room for day. Flowers bloom, hopes rise, windows are thrown open. The woman sees a young cat. Gray and Slinky follow the song and hungry voices to where the wrens flit, dirt brown against brown dirt. Alarmed, the woman watches the cat make a vigil at the foot of the pine tree below the nest box. This won't do. As she approaches, the cat's green eyes remain fixed on the box. It does not struggle when she scoops it into her arms and carries it in the direction from which it came, to her next-door neighbor's house. She shares a length of tall fence with this neighbor, and also a low fence that is buckled and come apart, but little else. They've spoken a few times about fire safety, yet no warmth has kindled between them. She cradles the cat in her arms, limp and purring, as she stands on her neighbor's doorstep and knocks. The door opens. Her neighbor, a willowy young woman named Freya, steps toward her and says, "Yes?" Her face brightens with affection as she sees the cat. "Good morning, Freya. Is this your cat?" "Yes." She's so excited to finally get outside and explore everything. The woman flinches. The weight of her request feels equal to the heft of the cat as she hands the cat to Freya. "Your cat seems very sweet, but it's nesting season. I've got a box of wrens. The chicks need a few more weeks to fledge. Do you think you could keep the cat inside?" Freya shrugs, allows the cat to melt from her arms to the porch step and away into the yard. "Oh no, but feel free to shoo her away," she says, turning back into the house. Song is stolen from the air. The hungry chirps from inside the box grow faint, then stop. The nesting wrens have vanished. The lizards who sun nearby on the rocks are also hunted by the cat. Finally, the young cat itself is nowhere to be seen. The woman doesn't trust herself to ask her neighbor where it went. She doesn't doubt that Freya loved the cat as much as she loved the wrens. Outdoor cats don't last where coyotes prowl. Months pass before the woman can bring herself to open the nest box to clean it one morning in the dry heat of summer. No one can possibly be inside. Her sadness about the nature of cats and her dissonance with Freya has settled like dust, heavy to the surface but easily loosened. The wren's nest she finds inside does not look comfortable, built of a thick mat of twigs and pokey pine needles, a twine of grasses, lined with a few feathers from scrub jay, flicker, and dove. The wreck of a small skeleton bows in the cupped center, the remains of a chick whose parents fled. The woman knows she must accept this lesson. Loss comes to every life. She wonders how her heart can stretch enough to love it all, her neighbor, the cat, the wrens, the whole delicate order of life that unfolds with affection and heartbreak. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Matt. I'm writing as Matthew Allen. My memoir, Out of Body, is about surviving the closet, coming out late, and fighting like hell for your life. I'm going to read 2 excerpts. The first one is from an essay called The Jungle, and I should mention I'm going to be talking about sex in this piece. As the years wore on, I came to see the hookup apps as a jungle. It was a wild place, full of surprises and danger, and the less expectations I walked among its trees with, the better. I didn't always get off. In some encounters, nobody did. We struggle to learn each other's bodies, each other's needs in these fleeting, introductionless spaces. Sometimes, a man attempts to force his body to cooperate, to reach an accord with a stranger and land what he wants, trading on things he isn't certain he can achieve. I have been in bed with men who only wanted to give head when I also only wanted to give head. And when coming to terms with our respective bodies' failures to provide the needed erection, the result could be exasperating or frightening or intimate. You never know what you're going to get. Over time, the excitement grew addictive, part and parcel of the hollow pleasures Grindr hookups typically offer. There is a shared language one can learn to navigate the jungle, a lexicon of acronyms and nomenclature not unlike the handkerchiefs gay men once used to adorn their pockets out on the scene, color-coded to communicate their appetites to a knowing audience. It is odd to step outside the culture for a moment, back into the heteronormative world, and find such limited knowledge of our most basic terminology. Ask your straight friends if they know what verse means. But it makes sense in the arc of our history. We have always fucked each other in a shadow world. Even as we have integrated more into their world in many ways, our sex remains apart. Grindr is just another form of how we have always come together. We have never been safe. All right. Let's see if I can find my marked space. All right, this next excerpt is from an essay called Breathing Room. I was wrong, of course. Naive, too new as usual. Leonard was right about me. I wasn't used to being with men, not men who had been down in the dark for too long. I hadn't even realized that we had never seen a sunrise together. That half of our story was mythology. We were not gods at all, but men. 2 broken men holding on to each other at the bottom of the ocean. Leonard had adapted to living in the cave. I don't know who did it to him, if it was the man who tried to give him HIV, or someone else, or an accumulation of sinking weights that had grown on him over the years, like barnacles. But it eventually became clear that without the constant pressure of the deep dark, Leonard believed that he would die. He only knew how to survive in places most men would never dare to seek. Sometimes you can't get to the surface together. Sometimes you have to leave the other man behind. I wanted so badly to bring him to the surface. I couldn't. You can't save him, my friends would say. You can't fix him. That's what you think, I'd retort silently. You'll see what I can do. And so I tried to drown with him among the remains of our kin, with all the lost gay men who would never see the surface, who would forever remain nameless, whose bodies would never be brought to shore. A day came when I didn't want to live in both places at once, when I was ready to be done with the darker place, ready to swim upwards, when I started to push back at him, at all the things that had begun to weigh me down, his violence, his debts, his concept of self, the eternal cave seeker, the survivor. I wanted more than survival, more than simply to breathe. I wanted fresh air and sun and sky. He responded with fear cloaked in fury. He said, "We're not the partners I thought we were. My mistake. I swam upwards, clawing for the sun. Cosmic justice is coming for you, he shouted from the unseen places. I had learned so much from him, from my time in the deep dark. I knew that I needed to see what was down there. And what I had found was not just rock and water, but myself. With just enough air left, I had finally seen this self in all its worth and value, in one perfect moment in which I knew I was truly alive. My own self. Somehow yet a thing worth salvaging, something worthy of light. We all get what we deserve. Leonard's voice chased me upwards to the surface. Still, now, I hope that he was right. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Beth and I've been working on a collection of essays about the intersections of my anxiety and my love of the natural world. I'll be attempting to read today a letter I've written to Amy N., who is the author of World of Wonders, and that's a lovely collection of essays that expresses awe towards the natural world and plants and animals, from narwhals to red-spotted newts. So here's my letter to the author of World of Wonders. Dear Amy, your descriptions in World of Wonders make me want to hug a narwhal. If only I could get past my worry of accidentally impaling myself. I write about my inclination to worry in World of Worries, a title your book inspired. I have a question about your book. I hope it's not inappropriate to ask, but is your author photo touched up? Because your face looks so flawless, it makes me think you bathe in the happy tears of a unicorn. What's your skincare routine? I only ask because I'm in my 40s and I still have acne. These types of marks look much, much, much cuter on the red-spotted newt you so vividly write about. Although I do notice beautiful illustrations accompany many of the animals featured in your book, yet such an image is curiously missing for the red-spotted newt. I'm old enough that I won't take that personally. Some people seem surprised by my age, and I often wonder if my acne makes me look younger, though it might not be my skin issues so much as my immature sense of humor. Like, I couldn't pull off the adorable essay about the axolotl the way you do. You even provide the pronunciation axolotl, and yet somehow avoid the temptation of including something like, I ask a lot of questions about amphibians. I'm sure I could avoid no such thing. And I'm sure you do ask a lot of questions about amphibians and otherwise. Questioning is often part of wonder, which you do so wonderfully. As for me, I developed the muscle of wonder through a specific type of wondering: worry. I suppose I've always been a worrier, but I really cultivated worry for the outdoors during Girl Scouts. By the time a young girl has crossed the bridge from brownies to Girl Scouts, she's more than earned a badge for worry. Not that they offer badges in that. There's a badge for first aid, where they teach you what to do in case someone is heavily bleeding, in shock, or choking on their snickerdoodle. They tell you to beware of poison oak and poison ivy and prickly thorns. You should leave a trail of sticks and rocks behind you as you hike in case you get lost. When no one comes to find you, it's safe to eat anything birds eat, more or less. The same holds true if you're on a plane that crashes and you're stuck in the wilderness. This is what you should do if you come across a bear. This snake is poisonous, but if it has that color stripe, that snake actually is not poisonous. It's very important to figure this out. That snake is not poisonous, But if it has this color stripe, it is. And when it bites you, because it will, when it bites you, this is what you should do. Be sure to place rocks around your fire and put it out when you're done. These kids didn't listen to Smokey the Bear, and they were burned along with the forest. Big fires, stranded hikers, crashing planes, poisonous snakes, vicious bears, itchy plants, Girl Scouts needing tourniquets. But now, let's sing a happy song about the smile in my pocket that belongs on my face. I suppose there's no reason keeping the smile in my pocket. Pockets are for worry stones. While wonder basks in the light of curiosity, joy, and awe, let us not forget that wonder also means a feeling of doubt or uncertainty. Worrying is basically wonder whilst wearing anxiety-colored glasses. Both worry and wonder come from a sense of inquisitiveness and curiosity. Worry invites you to pay attention to your surroundings as you wonder about all the possible outcomes of a situation. If you're walking through a forest, wonder is a sense of awe as you gaze at the towering trees and listen to the birds' symphony. Worry, on the other hand, is the nagging thought that trees fall, and the obvious next question: if a tree falls in the forest and a hiker is there to hear it, but the hiker is clonked unconscious by the tree, does the tree make a sound? Without worry, we might not appreciate the wonder quite as deeply. When you start to worry about a tree falling, you really notice and appreciate its height, girth, and the intricate architecture of its stabbing branches. You ponder the degree of prickliness of its cones and what types of poisonous spiders build their webs in the spaces between the scales. Amy, it's no wonder that you and I both like wonder, or worry. We actually have a lot in common. Amy, you're really way, way, way too cool for me to be anything like you. We both teach at public universities, though you're a full professor and I'm a lecturer. Some of my students who work at Starbucks or Taco Bell earn more than I do. And from what I've heard or read in World of Wonders, you seem to like teaching, whereas I fled to the safety of online teaching at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, and I have not seen a classroom since. We also both write about food, though you have a beautiful book, Bite by Bite, whereas my food writing tends to be long, drawn-out articles for an online publication. It's a side gig to supplement my income. I'm pretty sure most of my articles are being written for search engines and AI engines, but hey, if they want to keep paying me to write 3,000-word articles about things like how to upgrade your fried egg sandwich, I'll keep writing. I definitely hope you, Amy, keep writing, and I hope all of you keep writing. Whether about food, animals, or whatever wonders catch your eye, your words are gifts. I strive to emulate the way you face wonder, while I will be over here with worry all over my face. Warmly and worryingly, Beth. Thank you.
Thank you all. That's our 10 incredible writers. Give them another hand. We'll see you at 3 o'clock for Kim. Yay!